Moving on to page 47, you should already have the title and the page numbered. For these examples, I suggest that you make 2 columns, so number 1 on the left and number 2 on the right. That way you have enough space to fit all of these example problems. So copy down the directions, and then number 1 and number 2. For number 1, again, we are doing these solving using square roots. So we're going backwards of the order of operations, so we're doing SADMAP, which means we need to take care of the adding or subtracting first. In number 1, we have a subtracting 8 on the left-hand side, so we need to add 8 to both sides of the equal signs. If you need to draw that line down the equal sign, then go for it. Whatever you need to do to make sure you get these correct. So we get x squared equals 8. Now we have to take care of multiplying or dividing. This 2 is being multiplied by the x squared, so the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. The 2's on the left cancel. We are left with x squared equals 4. The x squared is now by itself, so to get rid of the squared, you square root both sides. On the left-hand side, the squared and the square root cancel, leaves us with x equals. On the right-hand side, we took the square root of 4, so our answer is automatically going to be a plus minus. 4 is a perfect square, so the square root of 4 is 2. You can leave your answer as x equals plus minus 2, or you can separate it out as x equals 2 and x equals negative 2. On a quiz or a test, if you only write x equals 2, you are wrong. It has to have a plus minus, or the problem is or your answer is incorrect. You can write the 2 separate answers out, but somewhere along the line, you need to show that you have a positive 2 and a negative 2. Number 2 is the same format. Again, we are solving using the backwards order of operations, so we have to take care of the adding or subtracting first. For number 2, we have an adding 6 on the left-hand side where the x squared is. So the opposite of adding 6 is subtracting 6. On the left-hand side, the plus 6 and the minus 6 cancel. Leave us with 3x squared equals 33 minus 6 is 27. We have multiplication going on in our problem because this 3 is being multiplied by x squared. So the opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. 3 divided by 3 cancels, leaves us with x squared equals 27 divided by 3 is 9. To get rid of the squared, we are going to square root both sides. On the left-hand side, the squared and the square root cancel, leaving us with x. This answer is plus minus 3. Moving on to number 3. We have 2x squared equals 40. Again, we're solving these using backwards order of operations, so we're dealing with adding or subtracting first. On the same side of the x squared, there is no adding or subtracting. So we're going to move on to dividing and multiplying. We have a multiplying by 2, so the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. So we are left with x squared equals 20. To get rid of the squared, we have to square root both sides. So square rooting both sides. On the left-hand side, the squared and the square root cancel, leaving us with x equals plus minus, automatically a plus minus, the square root of 20. Well, 20 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to leave that as the square root of 20 right now. This is not your final answer. Before you decide what your final answer is, you have to see if you can make that factor tree for what's underneath the square root. So off to the side in the margin or wherever you've got room on your paper, we're going to take 20 and we're going to tree it. It does not matter what you start with, as long as in the end, all you have is prime numbers. I'm going to start with a 2 because 20 is even. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this is back to what we did yesterday and the day before for simplifying radicals. I'm going to circle in pairs I got a pair of 2's. That means 1, 2 is going to come out. This 5 is left over, so I'm going to put a box around it. That 5 is stuck underneath the radical. So looking back at our answer, the x stays, the plus minus stays, but this square root 20 we simplified to be 2 square root 5. So the final answer for number 3 is plus or minus 2 square roots of 5. If you wanted to write your answer out as 2 separate answers, you can. X equals 2 square root of 5 and x equals negative 2 square roots of 5. So if the number that you end up with underneath the square root is not a perfect square, you have to try and tree it to simplify it. And then your answer is this simplified radical. Number 4, put a star next to it. This again is a vertex form, so it's going to be a little bit different when it comes to solving at the end. Backwards of the order of operations, SADMAP. We are going to deal with any adding or subtracting. We've got this minus 15 that we have to get rid of. So we're going to add 15 on both sides. Leaves us with 3 parentheses, x plus 6 squared. 15's cancel. This should say plus 15. 0 plus 15 is 15. Now we've got multiplying or dividing to deal with. This 3 is being multiplied out front, so you are going to divide by 3. On the left-hand side, the 3's cancel. Leaves us with x plus 6 squared equals 5. On the left-hand side, we now have the squared to deal with, so the opposite of squaring is square rooting. On the left-hand side, the square root and the squared cancel. Leave us with x plus 6 equals plus minus. For right now, I'm going to write down the square root of 5. So 5 is not a perfect square. That's why I wrote down the square root of 5. And you have to think to yourself, is 5 a perfect square? Well, we know that 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. 5 would fall somewhere in the middle. So no, it is not a perfect square. So you would have to think, can I tree it? Well, 5 is just 1 and 5. So it's a prime number. So this one cannot be reduced. So this is going to stay as the square root of 5. But we're still not done. We still have to get that x by itself. So we have to get rid of this plus 6. To get rid of the plus 6, you minus 6 from both sides. This 5 is stuck underneath the radical. So we can't add anything to it anymore. We can't subtract anything to it. So we are going to have x equals plus minus the square root of 5, and then this minus 6 just comes out behind it. Now, I would be okay with this line written here in blue. But mathematically, and you might want to write this down somewhere, you put your whole number out in front and then plus minus your radical. I got 1 of 5 right here. So your radical should come second. So whatever has a square root should come behind the whole number. So we need to rearrange this answer. So x equals, I need this plus minus 5 to come second. So plus minus square root 5 is going to come second, which means this whole negative 6 comes up front. So your final answer is negative 6 plus minus negative 6 plus minus the square root of 5. So mathematically, one more time, the whole number needs to come up front. So we just switch the order of our answer. This one is different than example 3 on page 46. And I'm going to go back to that real quick. Because number 3 on page 46 had a whole number with a whole number. So you had to branch off and find your 2 separate answers. But because on page 47, because this has this square root of 5 is a radical, you do not have to branch off into your 2 separate answers. Okay, on page 47, this is the last problem. You need to write down the directions. It says list the steps on how you would solve negative x squared minus 3 equals negative 39. The EOC likes to put down questions like this. It wants you to put the steps in order, or they want you to show all of your steps, explain how you found your work, or they would show you how a fake student did the problem, ask if they were right or wrong, and then have you fix it. So the easiest way to do problems like this, I feel, is if you actually do the problem and then list your steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually solve the problem, and then we will write down the steps that we did. So if you were given this as your problem, I'm going to work this right here from the question itself. Negative x squared minus 3 equals negative 39. You need to get the x squared by itself first, so you would add 3 to both sides. These cancel, leaving me with negative x squared equals negative 36. So again, we're going backwards of the order of operations SADMAP. So we did the adding and subtracting. Now we have to take care of dividing or multiplication. There is secretly a negative 1 up front, so we would have to get rid of that next. So to get rid of the negative 1, you would divide by negative 1, leaving us with x squared equals positive 36. So we took care of the dividing and the multiplying. Now we have to take care of the exponent. So to get rid of the squared, you would square root both sides, leaving us with x equals automatically a plus minus. The square root of 36 is 6. It is a perfect square, so you do not have to make a factor tree. So this would be our answer right here, x equals plus minus 6. So now, truly answering the question, because it wants you to list the steps, I'm just going to put into words what we did. So if this were a test or a quiz question and all you did was solve the problem, you would get it wrong. I would need you to write down what you did in sentences or bullets or however you would like. So listing the steps. The very first thing we did here, I did in this bluish purple color. I added 3 to both sides. So we would add 3 to both sides. My second step is what I did here in orange. So our second step is we divided both sides by negative 1. My third step was there in green. We took square root of both sides. So square root both sides. And not really a step 4, but I will go ahead and put in a step 4, just stating what the answer is. So for 4, we can just say that x equals plus minus 6, which really means that x equals 6, x equals negative 6. Sometimes the problem might ask you what is the positive root, and you would only choose the plus 6. Sometimes a problem might ask you what is the negative root, and then you would only choose the negative 6. But if it just asks you to solve, you could leave your answer as x equals plus minus 6. So make sure that all of this is on page 47, and all of your notes on 46 are complete also. So when we do some practice and go over some things tomorrow, you have everything complete. I will also grade these notes on the half day next week, along with the other notes that you should have completed before fall break. I believe that's pages 32 through 35. So just make sure your notebook is complete.